All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is Tuesday, December 13th of 2022. Getting a little bit of a late start today. Appreciate you guys being patient, waiting around for the stream to start a little late today. This show is usually at 2 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Small late start today, but we are here and we are ready to rock and roll. Got a 5-game NBA slate as well as a 12-game NHL slate. Should be plenty of DFS action for you to jump in on tonight with no NFL. We will have NFL this Saturday, though, so get an extra day of NFL if you cannot tell. Big NFL fan over here. Love the NFL DFS contests and sweat in general. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS related questions. Questions usually come in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you are not joined up in the Discord, there is a link in the description below to get joined up. And if you are not a member of SaberSim, there is a link to a 7-day, no strings attached free trial. Highly recommend checking us out and coming into this show and asking any questions you have related to the app. If you're just tuning in, have questions, throw them in the YouTube chat. As always, we will get to all the questions before the end of the show. I promise you that. But with that being said, we are going to jump right in here. We are going to pull SaberSim up. Looks like we have about 3-ish questions to get us going today. So if anybody has any questions, now is a great time to throw them in the chat so we can keep the show rolling. But that being said, first question from Casey Lust said, if I have 2 ideas on specific game scripts on NFL showdown slates, is there a way to have SaberSim prepare and combine both sets of lineups, 10 of one and 10 of the other script, in, say, a 20 max lineup? Okay, so no. The answer is no. There's no good way to do this right now. You can technically do this with getting your hands dirty in the CSV files. So if you take the CSV that you come into that you download from DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever, you can open that file like on your computer, and then in a build, which I'll just demo this really quickly. So it is something that is on our radar for sure and has been requested a lot. We know a lot of people would really like this feature. So definitely should be something that we are trying to build in the very near future, trying to ship a couple other things first that we think are really cool and really exciting, which we have alluded to here on the stream. But if you want to do this, right, what I would suggest is, say you have a 20 max contest in a CSV, right? Download the CSV, open the CSV on your computer. It looks like, Excel file. And in this number of lineups, change it to, 10, like we're saying for this demo. If you hit this download lineups on this screen in the post build screen, this download lineups is just the lineups file. It is like if you try to hit download lineups and upload it to FanDuel or DraftKings, it would not work because it is not the CSV file that they recognize. It is just like your raw lineups file. So you can download this and then you can copy and paste this into your CSV. And that is one way to get 10 of one build and then 10 of another build into your CSV and go into your contest. A little tedious, something we want to fix in the future, but for now, this is the way I would suggest doing it there. Okay, got a question here from M Robinet 3, and I'm gonna get this one in the chat. Okay, question says, on the 12-12 show, you explained that using review mode after a slate is completed to filter for lineups in the pool that hit the 1% threshold can be a way to check for a plus EV pool. This makes a lot of sense, so I tried it with the last 4 NFL slates that I played, 2 showdowns, and the Minimax main slate for week 13 and 14. In all cases, my pool had well under the desired 1% lineups. The range was between 1 and 16 lineups, all within a pool of 3,000. So best case was 16 out of 3,000, or roughly about 0.5%. I'm mostly respecting the sanctity of the Sims and making very few changes pre-build, all of which are small adjustments to projections. My question is, should I consider this a case of variance or a sign that I need to do more or less pre-build? Okay, this is a really good follow-up to something that we have been talking about a lot over the past week or so. So this is a really good question and a really sharp follow-up. I originally got this idea from Jordan. Jordan was the old host of Office Hours, really smart individual, and he kind of put me onto this, and I thought it was a really good idea, which is why I decided to share it. I know that Jordan tracked this like over like months and months, and to say that tracking it over 4 slates is a sample size issue, I think is a very true statement. I think that is just a very small snippet of, so many slates that you're probably playing or participating in over an entire season. That being said, I think that, kind of from having internal discussions and talking with some people behind the scenes, my understanding is like, you might go, multiple slates where you're kind of under, and then you're gonna have like a few slates where you are just way over and you just like smash the slate completely, like really make up that equity back is going to be in big chunks. So that does happen. That is why a larger sample size is important. I wouldn't put too much weight into like this 4 slate snapshot that you've kind of taken, but I think that, if you were to like find an efficient way to go back and look at that in like a time efficient manner where it doesn't take too long, you can do this over a longer period and kind of see if that holds up, if what we're kind of talking about ends up happening, where you just have like a few slates where you just kind of smash the slate, and then that makes up all of your 1% equity back kind of in big chunks. So it is something that like I did myself, not on a pool level, but on like a lineup level. I was tracking, how many of my lineups were going into the top 1% for an extended period of time. And like in NBA specifically, I would just have certain slates where I would just smash a slate and get a lot of that equity back. So I would encourage you to continue to track it if that is something that you're really interested in, and don't get too hung up on such a small sample size. But really sharp follow up, and happy to continue to talk about that specific topic. Seems to be one that people are liking and kind of responding to there. All right. This is our last question in the Discord, and then we will hop over to YouTube chat and see if any questions come in there. Haven't seen anything yet. Maybe we will find a way to make this stream go a little longer until we get some more questions coming in here. But got a question here in the Discord. Says, where am I? Okay. Is ownership updated after the NBA slate starts? If so, can you discuss the process? Example, last night, Capella was scratched after the start of the slate. Okongwu ended up getting like 40% ownership on FanDuel, but SaberSim still had his ownership projection really low. To be clear, this is not a complaint about SaberSim ownership projection, just seeking clarity so I know how to develop my process. Okay, so good question here. This is definitely worth clarifying. So ownership does not update once the slate starts. So if, for instance, tonight, let's say, somebody like Zion gets, scratched, and Larry Nance Jr. ends up, getting a bump in minutes, maybe ends up starting. We are not rerunning ownership, mostly because ownership is coming out and the ownership projections can like be different than the actual ownership, and it's very like contest specific as well. So we do not update ownership after. I think that, depending on when the news breaks is kind of important. Like if you were going to assign ownership to somebody, right? I think this is like really what we should be talking about is, let's say Zion gets ruled out, right? And like after the slate starts, maybe around okay, let's talk about 2 instances here. We'll do like 2 examples. Let's say Zion gets ruled out right after lock. Like slate locks 7:01 Eastern, Zion ruled out. For whatever reason, Pelicans come out with their lineup way in advance, like an hour before, where Larry Nance is starting. That is a lot of time for people to react to a situation. And the time that the news broke is the time that most people are around or paying attention and will kind of capture and capitalize on that news. Um, it is like when news breaks closer to a game start or later in the slate, I think that there's more edge because less people are probably paying attention. Less people, people might leave their computers and not able to swap as efficiently, not paying attention. So I think like as news breaks closer to games starting later in the slate, you're going to get more of an ownership edge. I didn't actually play last night. I just played some NFL Showdown, had some things going on. So I can't say exactly how I handled the situation or how it unfolded. But basically, I think the moral of the story is like the earlier news comes out, the more time people have to react. And especially if that news comes out closer to lock, more and more people are going to take advantage of that and make a swap of some sort. It is when news breaks later in the slate, really close to game times, like the game time starting, that really creates an ownership inefficiency, and you can get a lot more leverage in that type of situation. So not sure exactly how it worked, but just so one more time, like we do not rerun ownership after a slate starts. We only update projections. So really good question. Definitely worth clarifying, and wanted to provide a little bit of an example as to how different things work in different situations, how ownership is a little more fluid in certain late swap scenarios. Okay, no questions in the YouTube chat yet. Do see a question here from Naj. I'm going to throw this one in the chat from Discord. Naj said, question, I play a lot of single entry. What would be the best strategy for picking a lineup out of the pool? And do you still recommend making 1,500 for single entry? Okay, I'm going to start with the second part of the question. So I would suggest still building as big of a pool as you can, regardless of how few entries you're playing, unless you're in a time crunch, right? If you're in a time crunch, I think it's okay to build less, but the reasoning for that is that the lineups are not built in like strength descending. It's not like this is your best lineup that we built first, and then this is your second best lineup, because we are not building based on average projection. All of the lineups get built, and then SaberScore goes in and grades the lineups. So your best lineup based on SaberScore could be the last lineup that was built, but once it got to the grading process, the algorithm decided that this was the best lineup and moves it all the way to the top. So building as many lineups as you can, given a ideal building environment where you're not in a time crunch, is always the best option. So first part of the question, that is how I would do that. And then the second question, it really depends, how many lineups you're building and what you're trying to do, right? So let's say you are like literally building one lineup a night and you are going to play this one lineup, right? The way I would handle it personally is I would probably do some research and kind of figure out, maybe like one or two guys that I want to be on. And I might come in here and I might filter for them, right? And it's like, okay, I've done some research and I really think that, I ran some test builds, I ran some research builds. I've done some research outside of the app. I really think Chris Paul is a good play. And I really think that Jonathan Kuminga is a smash at this value or something, right? You can use the filters. And I just narrowed my pool of 500 lineups down to 34. So there are 34 lineups in my pool of 500 that have these two players in them. And I'm not opinionated about anything else on the slate, right? But you can come in here, you can see what these lineups look like. Am I okay playing a 3 stack? Or do I want to play, like, do I want to play a 4-stack? Maybe not, right? So like maybe you skip this one, and you can come in here. You can kind of find a lineup that you like. I personally would be happy playing this number 1 lineup. Has the 2 players that we pointed out, and you know, stacking less than 4 players, perfectly fine there. So I would be totally okay playing this lineup. You see some correlation in here. Looks like a pretty good lineup to me. So if you're like really opinionated about who you want to play, that is one way I would handle it. If you are not as opinionated, but you still want to see some different lineups, right? Maybe you open this up to like the top 10. I'm just going to go, top 10 lineups, and I want to see, who is showing up the most in these 10 lineups, who is showing up the least. Am I okay, with some of these guys that are showing up in like 1% of my pool, but happen to be in one of the top 10 lineups in my pool as well? Or do it, I want to get rid of some of these guys. So, maybe I trash these ones, right? Where's Patrick Beverly 8? Okay, he's in a small amount of my pool. I'm going to trash this one, right? And you kind of narrow it down to a handful of lineups, and then you pick from there. Or maybe you're building, 3 single entries, and you want to play 3 unique lineups in your single entry. So definitely think there are like multiple ways to go about it. I think that, when I am managing a portfolio of lineups, I am much more interested in using min uniques and using like exposure settings. But when I am playing like one lineup, I kind of want to be a little more hands-on and use like filters, use spot checking, actually looking at the lineups and seeing if I'm okay with this lineup being in my pool. I think if you're playing less than or like more than 1 entry, I think it still makes sense to take advantage of the min uniques. That way your lineups can be a little more spread out and not be so intertwined with some of the other lineups that you have. So I think that, the more lineups you play, the more things like exposures and min uniques come into play as far as like balancing your portfolio and using those tools. If I'm playing like a single lineup, I'm probably filtering and looking for one that I really resonate with. But just my thoughts there. So let me know if you have any follow-up. Uncrabby Cabby said, "Hey Andrew, what's up, Cabby? Usually when you say this, you got a question coming on the horizon. So I'm going to assume you are still typing it out, and I will let you do that." All right. Follow up here from Naj in the Discord said, "If I'm playing multiple single entry contests, should my min uniques be higher or lower?" Okay, this is a good question. I would say the less lineups you're playing, the more min uniques you should have, and the more lineups you're playing, the less min uniques you should have. That is basically because the number of lineups you're playing is a larger number of your pool. So like as the ratio of lineups you're using in your pool goes up, your min uniques should go down just due to not as many available lineups to reach that threshold of min uniques. And like we could prove this, right? So I'm going to put all of our lineups available in our 500 at 3 lineups. I bet you I could get at least 6. So 6 min uniques, I'm only at lineup 47. 7 min uniques, I could do it. 8 min uniques. So I can get all the way up to 8 min uniques with 3 lineups. And there are 9 players in a lineup on FanDuel. So that is like really cool. If you're only playing a handful of lineups, like you are so diverse, and that, if one lineup does bad, that basically has little to no effect on another lineup aside from one single person. And if we look here, a single person is not used in all 3 lineups. So if we turn this back down to 1, and then we open this up to, let's say 20, right? I bet I cannot get 8. I can get 6. I can't get more than 6, right? And that's just because of the available lineups. So we really stress that we really like the min uniques feature because the less correlated your lineups are, as long as they maintain a similar EV, which we believe they do in a pool of 500, the better, the smoother your variance is going to be over time, and you're going to have less nights where it's like really, really bad or really, really good, somewhere in the middle with plenty of shots still to hit a bink score. So only one of your lineups can win first, and that is really what we are after on most nights there. But good follow-up. Gonna jump over to YouTube chat. Got this question here from Cabby. Said, Andrew, do you eliminate the 1%ers in your pool? Generally, no. So what we're talking about is what we just talked about. Like, we see people in our pool coming up that are like 1% in the pool, but happen to make it into our lineups. I'll say that when I am building my diversifiers, because I follow the profit plan and build my diversifiers in so many lineups. But when I am building my elevators, say I'm building, 1 to 3 lineups, that is something that I do look at. For whatever reason. I mean, the fact is that they're showing up in that lineup for a reason. It's obviously a high Saber score lineup because it is toward the top, but it is such a small percentage. And in a elevator type contest, I kind of want to play more of like the better plays and not so much of the risky plays. Like that's kind of what sim diversity is doing for you. That is why we suggest building them differently. When you're playing a 150 max, the piggy bank or something, we're at sim diversity 10 on a night like tonight, and we're playing a single entry, usually 1 to 10,000. Our sim diversity comes down 3 ticks. It is a small slate, so sim diversity will continue to be high on most any contest. But when you get into like the larger, 11 gamers or like the NFL main slate, sim diversity changes like a lot, like 4 to 5 ticks on the scale. So that is like basically saying that you don't need to get as diverse. Your player pool does not need to get as wide as it does for a single entry, as it does for a 150 max contest. You don't need to find so many of those outlier plays to win. So I kind of keep that in my head. When I see somebody at like a 1% pool exposure, to me, that is like an outlier event. And when my sim diversity is kind of telling me I don't need to get as wide or as crazy in this type of contest, I kind of take that into effect and be like, this person was optimal in 9 out of the 500 lineups, but that is still too low of a number for me. And it is my preference to zero them out in depending on the number of elevators that I'm building. Sometimes I'm playing a ton of single entries, and sometimes I'm building 20 lineups for my elevators, and I won't take that into account. But I think that when I'm playing like 1 to 3 lineups, I would rather just find a lineup where that is not the case. But again, it's personal preference. You don't have to look at this. You don't have to worry about it. The lineup is in your pool for a reason, and usually for a good reason. But that is just something that I tend to think about, and I know other people do as well. But really good question there, Cabby. So appreciate you always asking good questions in the chat. All right. I see Naj is typing, and right now, no more questions. So I'm going to wait for Naj to get his thoughts in here, and then we will continue. All right. Question just came through. Question says, if I'm using 8 uniques with single entry like we were talking about, if a certain player doesn't show up on any lineups, can I use that information and feed him on my 20 max builds? I mean, technically you can do anything you want, but I just, to actually answer your question, I don't see how one thing really leads to another in that scenario. Like, just because the player isn't coming up. I mean, like, we only have 24 players in this player pool of 3 lineups. And if we were to go put our min uniques to 1, increase this to 20, we already have 37 players in our player pool. So I don't think that's a good idea, because then your player pool would be too condensed probably to only have 24 players make up 20 lineups. Like, this is min unique 1. We're saying every lineup can share 8 out of 9 players, and we still have 37 players in our player pool. So that isn't really like a conclusion that I would try to draw from increasing my min uniques so high. In that instance, I would really try and treat those as different things, and not go that route. But those are my 2 cents on it. If you have any thoughts or pushback as to why you think that might be more viable, I'm always open to listening and providing my thoughts on such question. But let me know if there is any follow-up there. But that being said, everybody, I know Tuesdays tend to be a little bit of a lighter day with no NFL. Should be a busy stream the rest of the week. And I appreciate everybody for still tuning in. Got off to a little bit of a late start today, but we will be back tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, as always, at our regularly scheduled time. So until then, good luck in your contest. See you guys. If you guys need anything, the team is always around in the Discord. Just reach out to us.